Hey friends, I'm Maxwell Freud, a queer, Minneapolis-based game designer and the host of Hatch This Way, a limited audio series where I chat with other queer folks in the tabletop industry to learn all about who they are and how they contribute to the hobby by being their authentic selves. And today I am joined by game designer and developer, Alara Cameron. Alara, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm recovering from COVID. It's a struggle. I'm obviously much better now that I'm not like dying, but yeah, it's annoying. And now I don't want to go anywhere anymore. Like I like a false sense of security and it's not there anymore. I'm like, no one go near me. I'll be inside for the next forever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least, lots of opportunity to play games, I suppose.
So first question, how do you identify?
As sparkly. No, but seriously. So I am a non-binary trans woman. So I identify as trans, non-binary, as a lesbian, and do I have any others? There was a little while there where I was joking that I was like a dragon collecting pronouns and flag emojis. But I think those are the main ones: trans, non-binary, lesbian.
And what are your pronouns?
She, her, or fey fair.
Love that. And then, I mean, I know a little bit because we chatted a smidge, and then also parent, right?
Yes, I am also a parent. I have 2 stepkids. One is 2 and one is 8.
Cool. I think it'd be fun to talk about all of those things.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would love it. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
Start with, I don't know, talk to me about your journey, just I guess in general, becoming the trans person that you are today.
Yeah. So there was a brief blip in my life in university in second year. I was hanging out with queer people and going to drag shows and experimenting with my gender. And that lasted about 6 months. And then like university and real life stuff started getting in the way. Had to get a second job to pay bills, and my grades were starting to fail. So I had to focus on school, and my living situation changed. And that all just kind of got gently shoved back in the closet and remained uninterrogated for another decade. And then in 2021, I met my now partner, and she had a suspicion that there was something different about me, given the way that I was present in social situations and how I talked about stories from that very brief 6-month period of time. Like, she'd mentioned that I would very frequently circle back to talking about these like 6 amazing months when I was 23. So she just gently nudged me and encouraged me. She said, I moved to the Northwest Territories for the year to do contract work for the government up there. And she sent me a care package that had a bunch of feminine clothes in it just to try. I mean, give it a go, see how you feel. And that opened a floodgate and started the snowball rolling. And by the end of 2021, I had legally changed my name, and I was on HRT, and I moved back to where I am now to move in with that partner. And and here we are, like 6.5 months on.
So this is a very recent journey for you.
It is a very recent journey for me. Yeah. Yeah, it was my big 2021 personal revelation.
So did you identify as like cis het before that?
Yeah, and oddly enough, uncomfortably so. So I used to think of myself as a cis guy, and I never reflected on the fact that all of my friends were women, and that I spent all of my time in like I was an academic for a while, and the academic like community groups I would become part of were, there's like either the teaching groups, which was a passion, or they were like queer or like women's groups that were about creating more opportunities for women. And just, these were all the spaces that I was always in, and I identified as a cis dude, and I thought of myself as doing the really hard work of a true ally. I was quietly listening to women and other people from underrepresented groups talk about what they needed and the challenges they were facing. And that was like 12 years.
So is there something like growing up in your past that you're like, oh, I need to avoid this? Or like, will you, um, I don't know, were you trying to like push, like consciously pushing it away for some reason?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something I'm still trying to like figure out. In my head, it's the project of trying to determine what made up the door of my closet and why was it barricaded. But I do think that I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to safely explore my gender and identity. And I think that contributed a lot to just not looking inwards in that way. I had a rough family environment growing up and didn't feel particularly emotionally safe in it. Provided for in every other way, but like there was no emotional safety in my household for me. And because of that, when I went to university, I was immediately living on my own and doing everything I could to become completely independent of family. And that took a lot of my focus and energy. And yeah, and except for that, like one little brief period of time where the one summer where I was only taking a couple classes instead of a full course load like I ended up doing for the rest of university. And then from there, I went into academia and I was a PhD student, and that brought its own host of stressors and anxieties. Um, and then, yeah, I think ultimately what gave me the space was just in the North, I had a job that meant my finances weren't a concern anymore, at least for the year. Like I was set, it was all taken care of. I didn't have to worry about how rent was going to get paid next month. I was finally living on my own, which is something I hadn't actually done yet. And I had this support network of partners who were gently encouraging and like provided that kind of emotional safety I think I needed to be vulnerable with myself.
I mean, how's it been since then? I guess how's that change felt for you?
Really comfortable. It was stressful in the beginning because there's a lot of that like, oh, maybe I'm not really trans, maybe I'm just making this up, or maybe it's just clothing, and hormones are very scary, and what if I'm doing this all wrong? And by the time Christmas rolled around last year, I had been on low dose HRT for I did 2 months on microdosing, and then it was about 2.5 weeks on full dose by the time Christmas had come around. And I was in this new situation with the kids and living in this new house, and my contract was running up. So I was trying to figure out like all of the stressors of life were coming in, and I had never felt more calm in my whole life. Like I was in a circumstance where I should have been the spiky ball of anxiety that I have been through most difficult times in my life. And instead, I was just able to face the circumstances. And it's not like it was easy, but just I wasn't anxious in the way that I always had been. And all that had really changed was my hormones. So it's been really comfortable.
Can you walk me through kind of your process and decisions around like changing your physical appearance and going through hormones and like changing your physical chemistry to kind of affirm what you're feeling on the inside, maybe? Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, and that was a big part of my coming out to myself and the world process through that year. Because I started with clothing, because like one of the stories I used to tell was how when I was 23, I would steal my roommates' dresses and wear them, but only in the apartment. But like if we weren't going out that day or it was a weekend and I didn't have to go to work, I probably stole one of her dresses and then just wore that. And so my partner had sent me some dresses but also some like feminine tops and some skirts. And I just started wearing them and realizing that they felt comfortable to me. It started getting me to interrogate my wardrobe and realize that even though I had always seen myself as someone who tried to dress nice and dress in ways that complemented my body, all of my t-shirts were half a size too big. All of my pants were half a size too big. My shoes were 2 sizes too big. I didn't even realize that I was literally walking around in clown shoes. And so from there, I started doing some thrift shopping of my own and trying to find more of my, I thought of it as trying to find my style. More brightly colored clothes, more feminine fit clothes, more feminine cut clothes because they felt more comfortable. And then I realized as I was buying all of this that all of my mask clothes were just sitting in my closet, not getting worn anymore. And I started interrogating my gender more closely. I came out as non-binary to my work colleagues, and that went over really well. Started wearing dresses to work, and then it was summer, and so which is a very short period of time in the north. It was like 6 beautiful weeks of short sleeve weather. And it's all insects. So you go from winter to insects and then back to winter again. So I spent that period of time I bought a whole bunch of dresses, which I now look at and realize I actually bought my first like 6 dresses are all cocktail dresses. So I was just strolling around town in cocktail dresses because, I had no sense of what people, expect as casual attire. I was just like, these are very pretty and I like the way they look on me. And wearing all of this brightly colored clothing. And I was basically spent all of this time just looking for things that felt good, that gave me that like boost of euphoria, that affirmed who I felt like I was, who I felt like I am. And then when I'd started thinking about hormones, my partner, again, amazing person that she is, got me a pair of breast forms. And I did not take them off for 6 months. Basically until the hormones had started doing things and it actually got uncomfortable to wear them. It felt too right. I like put it on and I looked in the mirror and it was like, wow, I'm just like with putting these clothes on. When I look in the mirror, I see a person I actually recognize, which made me simultaneously realize that every time I had looked in the mirror in the past, I wasn't seeing myself, which would explain a lot of my clothing choices. My ideas about what looked good on me were definitely not flattering, because I was seeing a person that wasn't me and trying to make that person look nice. And I was already in the process of seeking hormones when I got the breast forms, so it was already on the table. I decided I was going to start with a microdose and just see how that affected my mental state. And it ended up taking 6 months, partly because of COVID, partly because I guess both reasons are because of COVID. There's only one provider in the Northwest Territories, which is where I was. And so she's very busy. But then in 2020, no health professionals in the territory took vacation time. So in 2021, they had 2 years worth of vacation all banked up. And so she took a month vacation in August, which was right after my first appointment. So between that and then Delta outbreaks, I didn't end up it ended up taking 6 months from when I started the process to actually having a prescription in hand. And then, yeah, like I said before, once the hormones started working, it's this calming internal sort of sense. A lot of my anxiety faded, and I started to feel simultaneously more comfortable and more uncomfortable with my body. Things like facial hair suddenly became a problem, and I've been shaving a whole bunch. Like I basically hadn't had a beard since I started the non-binary stuff. But once I was on HRT, I started to realize that like that wasn't going to be enough. So got to figure out hair removal and all of the other various decisions one makes around transition.
So what is your goal? Like, do you want to, I guess, what are your hopes for like your journey and process in that regard?
In terms of physical transition
Yeah.
I think where I want to end up is honestly kind of wherever wherever my body goes with respect to hormones and with respect to the like social presentation and everything. It's a constant rediscovery of fashion and self. I've started, for instance, wearing a ball cap will emphasize the square aspects of my face, and I was very uncomfortable with that like 4 months ago. But for the last week, I've been wearing short shorts and a crop top jean jacket and a ball cap, and I am just the epitome of gender confusing at the moment out in the world, and I kind of love it. So I mean, that's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment. but every change, everything that I notice that's happening to me as the weeks and months go by on the hormones is also validating and affirming. So part of what I'm trying to do is not worry too much about what the end point is, because it's not really, there isn't really an end point.
Mhm.
HRT is puberty again. And puberty is 6 to 10 years long, and I'm only 6 months in. So I've got another got another almost decade before things are really settled in place. So I'm trying not to stress too much, and instead, wherever possible, redirect my attention towards those moments of euphoria and those moments where I do feel at home in my own skin, and use those as indicators of like what I should be doing or what should I do next, right? Like, if this feels really good to wear this particular outfit, then I should go get more things like it. And if this outfit's making me feel dysphoric now, maybe I should retire it. I'm not throwing anything out because, like I said with the ball cap thing, it's this really interesting sort of process of transformation and self-discovery. And so yeah, not really thinking about endpoints, but definitely enjoying the journey.
That's cool. I think one of my favorite things is seeing like people's reactions like post top surgery and things like that when they're just like, oh my God. Like it's like a huge moment, I think, of euphoria for them.
Mhm.
And you can like see it. I think that's really cool. So
Yeah, absolutely.
talk to me about your pronouns. Like, where did those come from? How did you land on those? How do you vibe with them?
Yeah. So as I'd mentioned, I'd started identifying as non-binary in early 21. And at the time, I was using they them pronouns, which was weirdly affirming and disaffirming. I like I kept having these strange feelings about it, where like someone would use my pronouns correctly, and I'd feel great about it, and then a few seconds later, I'd be like, "Wow, that felt odd. I'm not sure that I like that." And so eventually, I started getting partners to use she her, and that was just sparkles and felt great. And I mean, my core identity is trans femme, and so that's why she her pronouns are my main pronouns. But throughout the process of self discovery that I was going through last summer, I it was realizing that I'm I'm not a binary trans person, and so like I don't yeah, I don't relate to that concept of gender as a binary, and I understand that some people do, and that's awesome. But when I'd first come out as non-binary, I'd had dinner with my boss, and she's an old friend, and she was really excited and asking lots of questions. And she was like, "So, just can you help me understand with a metaphor? When you say that you're non-binary, do you mean like that you're somewhere in the middle between male and female, or do you mean that like you're somewhere off out in the cosmos?" And I was like, that one. Uh, yeah. Um, Out there with the stars twinkling away. And so I started looking into neopronouns, and there was a few trans femmes that I follow on Twitter who had just started using Fae Fair and Fae Femme pronouns, and I gave them a try, and I really liked them. And so just again, that spirit of following the euphoria, I brought them in, and so include them there as well.
I mean, do you have like a preference for how people use them, or
No, I mean, I'm very comfortable with people using either, with people mixing between both. I mean, most people just use she her, and that's fine. And occasionally I have a couple of friends that use Fae Fair, and that's lovely too. And so I'm not too particular about it. I mean, they're both sides of me, and yeah. So
briefly, because I don't think I've talked about it. Can you expound a little bit on like, did you say neopronouns? Is that the term for them?
yeah, so I think neopronouns is just the catch-all term for all of the different kinds of pronouns that folks use that are not she, her, he, him, or they, them. So Fae Fair or Fae Femme, Zer, Zem. I don't remember any others off the top of my head, but we could also be here all day. And I actually think that's a wonderful thing. I don't mean that dismissively. We could be here all day if we tried to go through all of all of the neopronouns that are in use. And I think that there's lots of different reasons why people might find neopronouns more comfortable and more fitting, ranging from things like my feeling of my lack of connection to the binary, and so wanting something that's distant from it, and that feeling good, to finding the neopronouns themselves very affirming and fitting.
No, that totally makes sense. My other question is, because I had this question come up in my own family, is the what about the children question. So can you talk to me a little bit about what it's like, them witnessing your journey? How do they understand it? Are they struggling? Are they having struggles outside of the home? What are the things that why do they ask the question? What about the children?
Yeah. So my situation is it's kind of a lucky situation. So on one hand, the 2-year-old doesn't have really a concept of any of this, and I didn't move in with them until I was already in the process of transitioning, and so I think from the 2-year-old's perspective, and I mean, you can come back and check in with me on this in 4 years, but from the 2-year-old's perspective, I will have always been me, and me being like this. The 8-year-old, similarly, I didn't move in until I was already Alara and on hormones and all of that. But they did know of me before that, and they are also themselves trans. And so this happened. This came up in the same parallel with my transition, but like I wasn't really in the picture from their point of view at the time. And so they are adamantly non-binary, like to the point where, we've had conversations, and they feel like they sometimes do these exercise videos at school, and the people will start the exercise in the videos. They'll start by saying, "All right, boys and girls," and the poor kiddo will feel excluded by that. Because because they're not thinking, because the people in these videos, these exercises are not for theys, and they're a they, and and we've just hit the point. It was okay to be using like gendered terminology when like playing pretend or joking around like king and queen, and like we've got some toy crowns and stuff. And the other day they were like, "No, I'm not any of that." And so we had a conversation, and they decided that if we're going to be doing these games, that I can call them they king, and that's it. And so they are themselves actively, I don't even want to say questioning, because they know who they are. They are actively carving space in the world for their identity. And so it's actually given us chances to have conversations. We can talk about things like transphobic encounters with peers. I can talk with them about that from a place of knowledge, like experience and understanding. And so, of course, at a age appropriate level, but it's actually been really nice because me and the kiddo are kind of going through some of this kind of stuff together in parallel.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've been kind of suggesting on the podcast is that if like a cishet person, a parent specifically, is listening, is to have someone in their child's life who is queer that they can relate to on some level, or just see to normalize like the option of being queer. I think the fact that the child has an opportunity to actually talk to someone with a similar lived experience is like a huge, that's an amazing gift to a kid. Most kids don't, like, I didn't have that growing up.
I absolutely didn't. I mean, certainly part of my closet that I had alluded to earlier was just not having the concept of transness. I mean, I did immediately start making trans friends when I got to university, so it didn't last long. No surprise, the people that I sort of gravitated towards socially, but still, like, I never had that possibility, that concept didn't even exist in my life until I was in my 20s.
Well, I loved all that stuff. Thank you for being so vulnerable. That's awesome. Do you want to transition to talking about games a little bit? You seem to know a little bit about them.
Maxwell, I would always love to transition.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what you do in the industry. So designer, developer, etc.
Yeah, I think, and the et cetera is appropriate. So, yeah, so I'm a game designer and game developer, and I'm also in the process of becoming a game publisher.
Mhm.
So I got started in the industry 7 or 8 years ago now. My first game was Legend of Korra Pro Bending Arena that I did with Sen Fung Lim. Done a bunch of games with Sen over the years. A few years ago, we also started doing development, and I've also done some solo development work. I think the last game on Kickstarter that I was a developer of was Finding Anastasia. And actually, there might be. I mean, yeah. By the time this goes live, the Kickstarter will be done. But currently on Kickstarter is game First in Flight by Genius Games, which I also had a hand in developing. Yeah, and so I'm doing that, designing and developing from big projects. My last big design project was Kingdom Rush, which did the sequel did super well on GameFound last year, and I think they're just getting it to a place where it's going to print. To smaller stuff like Finding Anastasia and First in Flight. So yeah, but then I'm also in the process of putting some of my own stuff out there under my own imprint with some of my own spins on it. So
Cool. I guess really briefly, how did you get into the hobby?
yeah, happenstance and coincidence, meeting the right person at the right time. I played I played D&D since I was 12. So in university, I was putting together a D&D group, and one of the guys that I met that joined the group was a big board gamer, and he like blew my mind with his collection of 100 board games. I was like, "What is all of this?" At the time, I thought board games was Magic and Catan,
Mhm.
which I was a Magic player too. So like that kind of got me started. By the end of that year, I also had 100 board games, and then I started making them just sort of for fun. I was just like, design contests on BGG, and it was like a fun way to be creative. So I was like, sure, I can make some games. This is fun. And then Sen saw the little Canadian flag on my BGG profile and sent me a private message. It was like, "Hey, I see, this dexterity game that you just posted about looks really neat. I see by your flag you live in Canada. I'm part of this group of game designers that are spread across Canada, the Game Artisans of Canada. And depending on where you are, maybe I can connect you with someone in our circle, and you could start making games with all of us." And I replied and I told him where I was and mentioned, "Oh, but I'm moving in a month, and I'm moving to this other city." And he replied and was like, "Yeah, that's where I live. So when you get settled, why don't you come over for dinner, show me your game and all that kind of stuff." And that was the beginning of it. I showed Sen the game. It was fine. Early designer stuff. I had some nifty ideas, but like it was way too board game for a dexterity game. And Sen at the time had already had many games published, and that helped me realize that I didn't have to be limited by these contests and making stuff for free and for fun. I could actually maybe get a game on the shelf. And then so I set that as a goal. Sen took me under his wing as a mentor. And, a few years later, we were at Gen Con, pitching games, meeting with people, and we had dinner with a friend and Nate Murray, and he was just starting up the games division with IDW, and they had a bunch of these intellectual properties that they were looking for games for. He listed them out, and Avatar: Legend of Korra was something Sen and I were both like, "Bam, we want that. We want to do that one." He's like, "Well, give me a pitch." So we got home from Gen Con and pulled up a piece of paper, and we sketched a drawing of what the board would look like in the middle of the game. We drew the arena and we put some like elemental symbols, and we're like, we want it to look like this, like visually. There'll be a game, we swear, but like this is what it'll look like, and like here's a one sentence description of what it'll feel like. And Nate was like, "Cool." And we heard back from him a month later. He's like, "Okay, so I talked to Nickelodeon about your idea. They're on board. So here's the timeline. Let's go." Yeah. So we pitched like a feeling, and then we had a design that we had to make. And so from there, it was kind of just little snowballs and opportunities that came up. yeah, that's how I got my start. Two coincidences. Happened to move into the city that Sen was living in at the same time he reached out to me, and just happened to have dinner with the guy who was starting IDW Games when he was looking for people to make things. So
What a cool person to get connected with right away.
yeah, I know. I'm very lucky.
I've done the tabletop mentorship program like during pandemic.
Yep.
So Sen participates in that. And he just like, I reached out to him one day. I'm like, can you give me feedback on this sell sheet? And he totally did. I was like, okay, you seem very busy and important, but you're taking time to look at my sell sheet and give me very good feedback that I can use. And that's how I sold the game. So
and that's the kind of person Sen is. And I do my very best to be just as giving as he is, because I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for his generosity and continued generosity. Like, we still work together. 8 years down the line, we're still making games together. So
yeah, it takes a special person to reach out, I think, to someone outside of your like lived experience, especially, and create those connections and bridges and making it a safe design space. Because I feel like it's much easier if you are a white cishet person who has found some success to lean towards other white cishet people that you can just like already have a base commonality with. Like, we know the same people and we can talk about kids and school. And so I think being able to find someone who is willing to be like, hey, we live near each other and that's all I need to know. You seem amazing. Do you want to make a game together? Is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you see yourself in the hobby right now? Like, where do you see trans people represented?
Good question. I don't. Not really. So I have I mean, once I started my transition and got settled into this process, I actually ended up rediscovering my creativity. I'd gone years thinking that my role in collaborations was as a refiner and developer. I would take Sen's ideas or Travis Chance's ideas and I would help them build them out. And once we had something on the table, that's where my skill set turned on, and really good at like fine tuning and turning a design, transforming it into an experience that resonates with its theme. And I thought that's what I was good for. I was not good at coming up with game ideas. And then I transitioned, and I just only want to make very gay things. It's just like I've got such a long list now of concepts and ideas and starts of designs that are all fundamentally queer in some deeply resonant way. And part of that is because it's just I've always expressed myself through creativity, and I've now got access to my whole self, and there's a lot of it in there that I want to make things with. And the other part of it is, you know, I have in the past been I'm the person who asks publishers to put in our contracts a commitment to diversity of representation. I had always thought of that in terms of gender as, you know, male, female, and race and racial representation, until I started transitioning and started realizing that queer representation is also something that is not really present, especially in board games. RPGs are a little better in that there's sort of an existing rich indie RPG community of queer community. But in board games, board game publishers are still very proud of themselves for having double-sided player boards that have male art on one side and female art on the other. And they're like, look, I did it.
Equality.
It's like, So in all of the development projects I'm on right now, I am pushing publishers for explicit trans representation. And like when I'm talking to new development clients, I'm now very upfront with them that like part of what my development work is going to be is to add queerness to your game. And if you don't want that, you shouldn't hire me, because I don't want to work on things that aren't improving queer representation in the gaming space. So yeah, there's that. And then I am in terms of where it's present in my actual active projects, I had mentioned before that I'm in the process of becoming a game publisher. I'm starting a company. Hopefully by the time that this podcast goes live, I will have said something about it. Otherwise, well, I mean, yeah, anybody who hears this is hearing of it here. And yeah, who knows where I'm at in 6 weeks. But the sort of tagline of the company is queer by queer. So I'm making queer products, queer games, and as many people as possible in the process are also queer people. So if I'm hiring developers, if I'm hiring illustrators, if I'm trying even to find at least be liaisoning with queer people in the distribution side of things. If possible, if I can get more queer hands on these projects, I am doing that. And that's where I'm putting, I'm going to be starting with some of these games of mine that I just, these queer concepts that I just want to see exist in the world that are unabashedly queer.
I love that so much.
Mhm.
No, that's amazing. I have another episode coming up with Snowbright. I think they have a similar
They do.
mission statement.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, they're part of my inspiration. So I've had a number of chats with T, and I do show them some of the games before I bring them under my before I decided to bring them under my own umbrella. And we also have they do like nonviolent stuff as well. And I'm not necessarily holding myself to that because I've got other things. Plus, it's great to have more companies like that, right? I mean,
Oh, there's plenty of
like
room. Plenty of room.
plenty of room. We don't need a monolithic representation of queerness. We need,
No.
just as much vibrancy as there is amongst all of us. So
Yeah, when I was shopping around my first game, I had someone that I like sent it to who reached out and was like, I told him I'm looking for, I don't want to go into super detail because it might be too much, but I reached out because I thought they were queer and they weren't. And which isn't, I don't think it was entirely my fault. It's just the way it presented was a very weird situation. And their feedback to me was like, well, if you're going to try and make a game that's like all queer, like you're severely limiting yourself and your options. And I'm like, thank you. I know that's why I'm doing it. I'm aware. Thank you for educating me on what being queer is, and doing queer projects with queer people is tough. I know.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah, that's pretty well how I decided to just start a company and do it myself. I've been in the industry for a while, so I know a number of publishers, and this first big project that I'm working on, that the game's working title, I talk about it on Twitter sometimes, is Lovable Sidekick. And the pitch is that you play as the sidekick to a hero who's on a quest to change the world. And you are simultaneously the person that's helping guide and support this hero overcome their flaws and achieve their quest, but you're also the romanceable NPC. So you part of what you're doing is you're building a bond with the hero, and that bond can become romantic and platonic in different kinds of ways. And so I have this like concept, this game that I'm working on, and so I started telling some publishers about it, and everybody's really excited about it. And then I started getting into the parts that are really exciting to me. All 10 of my heroes are trans. So not only am I representing through the romance mechanism different ways of having close relationships and putting that in the player's control, but all of the lead characters who have these little story arcs that you will follow are all trans. And every publisher I talked to was really excited about that. And when I told them that I was trying to decide between, letting another publisher handle this game or getting into the game myself, every single one of them assured me that I was the person that needed to make this. Like there are publishers that could handle this project, but the way that my vision exists and the way that the game concept is, my instinct that I might not end up happy or satisfied with how it's treated all the way through the process wasn't too off base. So yeah, so there was a lot of positive encouragement from basically just a different version of what you got told. Just like, yep, by being this queer, you're down to a handful of publishers that could do it well, that do the queerness well, or do it yourself.
Yeah, when I got the feedback, I came off more as like, you're probably not going to get this game made if those are your goals. And I was like, thank you. I will keep doing it. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, good luck. Well,
Sorry.
good. I hope you did get it picked up. So.
It did get picked up. But, you know, we'll see how it turns out. I think one of the questions I like to ask is like, you mentioned it, like, what are your goals? Like, what would you say is your mission to kind of like wrap all that up in going forward as a game designer, developer, publisher?
Yeah. I want to put queer games on kitchen tables. So, and that includes, and that also does include role-playing games. So I just talked a bunch about Lovable Sidekick, but I'm also doing some groundwork to start putting together some RPG contents that will probably be available far sooner than Lovable actually hits crowdfunding. And so I basically want to make the games that I wish already existed, and not necessarily mechanically, but just like the kind of representation, the kind of honest and true representation that isn't just a meme or a stereotype or an archetype, but is actually showcasing queerness in all of its different facets and ways of being.
Absolutely. Other fun questions. So talk to me about games that you enjoy or recommend to people, and or like, what are your go-to favorites? I think I like knowing these things. It's like a personality test.
Yeah, totally fair. So one game that I recommend all the time to people is Steampunk Rally. So published by Roxley Games, designed by Oren Bishop, a friend of mine, and it's such a fun, energetic, and accessible play experience that I have never put Steampunk Rally on the table in front of either new or experienced gamers and had people go, oh, that wasn't fun. Like, everybody just has a good time. It's laughing, it's silly, and it's fun to like do the puzzle of building your machine and then like powering it with dice and then driving through a mountain and losing half of it. It's got this really nice like narrative flow. And so, yeah, I love Steampunk Rally. I adore that game. It's very much my go-to. It also plays up to 8. And because play is the first couple rounds you play like turn impulses just so that everybody can get a handle of the details of the flow. But once everybody's got the mechanics, you play simultaneously. You do a draft and then you do your building and do your dice assignment simultaneously. So it plays 8 players just as fast as it plays 2. So yeah, it's a game I highly recommend. Fits on the shelf. In fact, has ousted several games on my shelf because it's so easy to table that it ends up being preferred over other things that are a little close to it. We've been the go-tos around here are mostly based on what the kiddo likes to play, because we play board games every night or two. We do play D&D with the family, so we do that at least once a week, sometimes twice a week if the toddler cooperates with going to bed. And otherwise, it's Creature Comforts is a current favorite in the household. So that's kids' table games, a really sweet little kind of worker placement feeling game about building a cute little cottage in preparation for winter. And we've also been playing Sovereign Skies, which is Deepwater Games, like 45-minute Euro rondel game. And that one's been another preferred game of the kiddo. Before that, it was all Cora Quest. So we got through most of the Cora Quest sequence of the adventure book. got that for the kid for their birthday, and yeah. So those are some things. Gosh, it's been so long since like I played games without the kiddo. So yeah, it's hard to say outside of that what's my go-to. The last big one was it took us a few months to actually get the time and space to do it, but I finally got a game of War of the Ring in a couple months ago. So maybe in 2 years I'll play War of the Ring again. Love it. It's a great experience, but it is an 8-hour experience with drinks and food. And,
Yeah, I scheduled a Twilight Imperium day with my coworkers, and we scheduled 2 months out. So
there we go. Yeah, that
I was
sounds
like,
great.
when can we do this? Just come in one weekend, and it's like, okay, what are you doing in mid-July? I guess. All right, see you then.
Yeah, yeah, but I get that. Like, getting time for gaming is can be challenging enough as is, and so I do often feel like if we are going to do something, I want to do something like Twilight Imperium or War of the Ring. Like, I want to do one of these big experiential games.
I think what I found is that, like, post-COVID, when I hang out with friends, I want to like talk to them, which makes playing games very difficult because usually I'm playing like a quick, limited communication seems to be a thing. Like if I bring the mind or the game or something, I'm like, this is not, or I brought the crew and I'm like, we just want to talk. And this is a game about not talking. It probably wasn't the best choice. So yeah.
Yeah, I've rediscovered cribbage for this reason. So, because it's those old parlor games. There's just enough game going on that you've got something to think about, to puzzle over, decisions to make, but it's not so much that you can't simultaneously carry on a conversation.
Yeah, I tend to not like games. Like, I don't like the decision of like, I could walk away and come back and then take my turn. Like, I like a very involved game, but people appreciate like, I also don't like commercials in a movie. Like, I hate watching a movie with commercials in it. I'm like, I'm a filmmaker. You're ruining the flow. Like, I want to get invested. I can't get invested if there's a Tide commercial in the middle of my sequence here. But people love that like break. So I'm leaning into it. It's fine. I'm excited to actually play games with friends coming up. Like, I started saying no to things so that I have time to say yes to like a game night instead of I have a project that I have to spend every night on. Just no. Started saying no.
It's good.
It's hard. Yeah. It's hard. I want to say yes to all the things.
I mean, yeah, I still haven't learned how to say no. So
I think last question, is there anything in the industry right now that you're seeing that gives you hope? I think your anecdote about pitching a game with all trans characters and getting positive reception gives me hope. Is like, I mean, I recently had a Kickstarter that we canceled. We didn't have momentum, and I can't help but think that it's a family-oriented game, and I feel like a lot of people who are browsing probably saw like me with like my very, very obvious rainbow circle around my face, and I say I'm a queer designer. Like, it was a big part of the campaign just because the game doesn't have any human queer representation in it. So I wanted to make sure I was present as a queer designer, and that, and this podcast was part of me still trying to move the needle, even though the game itself wasn't really doing what I wanted to do with games.
Right.
Like, there's no reason I can't still do something with it. So I can't help but think that like somebody saw it and was like, you know what? I don't need this game with this person assigned to it. I have other games. Like, I just can't help not think that. So I think hearing stories that prove me wrong is good to hear. So
no, I also chose the publishers I talked to carefully. But there was a lot of positive excitement about it, and I did have one publisher like express a little bit of sadness when I had said that I'm thinking about doing this myself, and they were like, "Oh, we'd be a good fit, though." I had that conversation once too. So, and that was actually really hopeful. I like in talking with publishers about some of these projects, um, because one of the things that you start to see when you do a lot of pitching and when you have a lot of contacts within the industry, is you start getting a sense of where things are going, because any publisher that's regularly putting games up for crowdfunding these days, if they're signing new games, they are signing them for 2 or 3 years down the line. They've got their 2022 figured out. They're 20 by this point in the year. 2023 is also locked in. They have a strategic plan. They know what products they're going to be putting in what spaces, and they're thinking about and they're starting to outline 2024. And there's a good chance if you're a designer and you sign a game at Gen Con, it's a 2025 Kickstarter, and that's going to be a 26 release. Like, most companies are thinking in like these kinds of timelines. And a lot of designers are thinking in terms of like next year, because that's, you're used to the consumer cycle. You see the new releases and the new announcements, and I when I'm talking with publishers about these games I'm working on, they're excited about them because they align with the direction things that they see the direction that things are going, and that aligns with that. And it's not just the queer themes either. I mean, I think that's a good thing to emphasize. It's also that the game concepts that I've got, like Lovable, it's fresh as just a thematic thing, like the idea of playing the sidekick to the hero and supporting the hero journey instead of the power fantasy of playing the hero journey. So like there were two sides of the coin that they were excited about, is like the queerness and the queer representation, and also looking at just looking at typical stories from new points of view. And I bring that up because I think that one of the things that queer creators do kind of automatically, because so much of the typical narratives that we find in board games right now are games made by cis het folk. When we sit down with the same concepts, I'm going to make a dungeon crawler, and I'm going to do it from a queer perspective. It ends up being different than the things that already exist. It's fresh. It is a different perspective. It's not just, gay and lesbian and trans characters running around in a dungeon. There's often other things that have changed, both in the perspective taking that the game takes and also the mechanics and the way it all holds together. And I think it was really exciting to me to realize that there is a growing space for more of these kinds of projects. Will we see them next year? Probably not. We'll start to, though, because these things publishers are starting to shift direction towards this kind of stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that the sort of larger retail outlets are also interested in. So I've already had some conversations about how going in this direction and doing things differently will potentially open doors for me to be able to access non-traditional channels of distribution, merely because I'm not doing another farming game or not doing another, medieval fantasy thing, because it's different enough that it would be interesting to those companies to carry the products. So,
no, for sure. I think one of my favorite pieces of feedback I got when I was playtesting my first game is like, I haven't played anything like this before. Like, that's great, because if I make something, even like, let's say the theme itself isn't queer, I want it to be queer just like existing. Like, I want it to feel different in a different way. And that's kind of like a double-edged sword when you're pitching, is like, this isn't like something else necessarily. So you can't just say, oh, it's like this. If you like this, you're gonna like this. So harder to market, but if somebody loves it, then it's easier to sell long term. So I think, like you said, seeing the change is a good way to focus on that, as opposed to
and that's a good way to put it. Harder to market, but easier to sell. Because one of the problems with things that are too much like other things is they don't stand out.
I already have that.
I already have that. I mean, it's as somebody who compulsively makes deck building games, it is very hard to market a deck building game. There's just so many already, that if you're trying to pitch a design and all you've really got is this is a deck building game with this and this twist,
It worked for Clank.
It worked for Clank, and that was like what, 6 years ago?
Yeah, that's great.
That's kind of where we're at. But if you've got something like what you're describing, where you can't really pitch your game by relating it to other things, you have to find. I mean, the challenge is finding the way to pitch it from what it is, which, to be honest, you should be doing anyway. If your pitch is this but different, then when you're sitting down with that publisher, you're already putting them in the mind space of thinking about an already existing game. And that's not going to help them see how this could stand out in the market. But when you have something that isn't comparable to other things, you're forced to do that, which is great from a pitch perspective. But also, if you can figure that out, if you can figure out like, what is this game on its own terms, it will be easier to get it picked up than other things. So
yeah, I like to approach design problems from like, what am I not seeing that I want to see? And then I go from there, as opposed to, I think a lot of people go from, I like this, but I'd like it more if, is another way to approach it. You can have success in both. I just like going from the what isn't there at all, and then trying to make it a thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. What isn't there is how I make games that actually end up getting sold, and the what if is design exercises that I'll play around with for a little while, and they'll help me understand a mechanic better. Every once in a while, that turns into something cool, but most of the time, it's just an exercise.
Well, that was amazing. I had an amazing time meeting you. You are incredible, icon. For sure. As a disclaimer at the end here, I just want to remind everyone, we are just a couple of queer folks. We do not speak for the entire LGBTQIA+ community, nor are we trying to. The best way to be an ally is just to keep learning, listening. Remember, we're all trying to figure this out together. That's all I have. If you're listening, know that you're loved and perfect just the way you are. And until next time, bye.
Bye.